Have you ever had a moment where the people who were supposed to build you up were the ones who tried to tear you down in front of everyone? I have. And it happened on the one night my family was supposed to be celebrating a legacy of giving. They never imagined their biggest failure would be the one to save it. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and roasted duck, a suffocating combination of wealth and expectation. I stood in a forgotten corner, partially hidden by a ridiculously large potted fern, watching my family work the room. My father, Richard Vance, the handsome, silver-haired figurehead of the Vance Family Foundation, was laughing with a city councilman. My mother, Karen, was a whirlwind of practiced elegance, her smile as bright and hard as the diamonds on her wrist. This was their arena, their annual charity dinner, a high-stakes reunion where they performed the part of generous philanthropists. And me? I was Grace Vance, the prop, the footnote, the disappointment. My dress, a simple navy sheath, felt like a wool blanket in the glittering sea of sequins and silk. I'd chosen it because it was quiet. My goal for the evening was to be invisible, but my mother had a sixth sense for my attempts at self-preservation. She glided over to me, her smile tightening the second she was out of earshot of the nearest donor. "For heaven's sake, Gracie, stand up straight," she hissed, her fingers digging into my arm as she pretended to adjust my sleeve. "Try not to look so lost. People will think we don't feed you." "I'm fine, Mom," I mumbled, the words catching in my throat. "You're not fine, you're hiding." Her eyes scanned the room and landed on a man with an aura of quiet, intimidating power. He had a severe haircut and a suit that probably cost more than my car. That's Julian Croft. He's considering a seven-figure donation. We need this to be perfect. The theme of the night was a tribute to my late grandma Eleanor, the foundation's original benefactor, and the only person in my life who had ever looked at me without a flicker of disappointment. The foundation bore my family's name, but its heart had been hers. That's why I'd done it. I'd spent weeks, writing and rewriting a short, 2-minute tribute to her. I wanted to talk about her kindness, her quiet strength, the way she taught me that a person's value wasn't measured in dollars or headlines. I wanted one moment, just one, for her memory to be honored with genuine love, not my family's manufactured sentiment. My father was approaching the stage, ready to give the introduction. This was my cue. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A familiar, frantic drumbeat. I took a breath and started to move from behind the fern. My mother stepped directly in my path. A solid wall of designer fabric and disapproval. "And where do you think you're going?" Dad said. He said I could say a few words about Grandma. I whispered, the paper with my speech clutched in my sweaty palm. Her laugh was a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "Absolutely not," she said, her voice a venomous whisper. "Brianna will handle it. We can't risk you getting up there and having one of your episodes. You'll get up there and stutter, embarrassing the whole family. We can't afford that, not in front of Mr. Croft." She flicked her eyes toward the important man, then back to me, her gaze filled with contempt. From behind my mother, my cousin Brianna appeared. A vision in sparkling champagne-colored silk, she was the golden child, the family's true heir. She was everything I wasn't, polished, articulate, and utterly ruthless. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her perfectly manicured nails a stark contrast to my own bitten ones. "It's for the best, Gracie," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Leave it to the pros." I looked past them, pleading with my eyes for my father to intervene. He met my gaze for a fraction of a second, his expression pained, before he looked away, turning his back to me to adjust the microphone. He was silent. His silence was the loudest sound in the room. I was officially excluded, banned from even speaking about my own grandmother. A few nearby guests who had overheard the exchange exchanged pitying glances and hushed whispers. I was the family charity case, the poor, awkward girl they had to tolerate. The sting was sharp, a physical blow to my chest. They hadn't just said no, they had mocked me, called me a liability. They had done it here in public on this night. Brianna glided onto the stage to a wave of applause, taking the microphone from my father. She smiled warmly at the crowd. "Thank you, Uncle Richard," she began, her voice smooth as velvet. "My grandmother, Eleanor Vance, always believed that our true legacy is the kindness we show others." She was using my words, the lines I had shared with her in a moment of foolish, misplaced trust. The blood drained from my face. I felt dizzy. I was a complete loser. A failure. A nobody. I couldn't breathe the thick, perfumed air any longer. I turned and slipped out a side door, escaping into the cold night air. The sound of their applause for my cousin, for my stolen words, echoed behind me. A final, brutal confirmation of my place in the world they had built. The week that followed was a suffocating fog of shame. I didn't leave my small apartment. I didn't answer my phone. The humiliation from the dinner replayed in my mind on a loop. My mother's cold eyes, Brianna's triumphant smirk, my father's silent retreat. He hadn't even called to check on me, no one had. On the third day, my mother's name finally flashed on my phone screen. I stared at it, my stomach twisting into a knot. I knew this wouldn't be a call of comfort. I answered anyway. "Grace, your father and I are extremely disappointed in you," her voice began, with no preamble, no "how are you?" Running out of the gala like that. "What must people have thought? You're so dramatic. You made us look bad." "You kicked me out," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You told me I wasn't allowed to speak. We told you to let Brianna handle it because she's better at it. It's not about you, it's about the family's image, an image you clearly don't care about." The line went silent for a moment. "Grow up, Gracie." I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red icon on my screen, my hand trembling with a rage, so deep it felt like grief. That was it. That was the final word. I was nothing more than a potential embarrassment, a flaw in their perfect public portrait. I curled up on my sofa, the insults useless, failure, nobody circling my head like vultures. The next afternoon, a thick, cream-colored envelope was pushed through my mail slot. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. My first thought was that my parents were sending some kind of official notice to disown me. My hands shook as I tore it open. It was a letter from an attorney concerning the final administration of my grandma Eleanor's estate. It explained that while the majority of her assets, her property, and her extensive portfolio had been bequeathed to the Vance Family Foundation as per her public will reading, she had set up a small, private trust years ago. A trust for me. My breath caught in my chest. Enclosed was a cashier's check for $50,000 and a statement for a small, conservatively managed portfolio of stocks. And beneath it all, a handwritten note on her familiar lilac stationery. The ink was slightly faded, her cursive elegant and strong. "For your voice, my dear," it read. "I know you have one. Sometimes. The world just tries to convince you that you don't. Don't let them. Make them listen. Love always. Grandma Eleanor." I sank to the floor, the check in one hand, and her note in the other, and I sobbed. I cried for her, for the loss of the one person who saw me. I cried for the years I had spent believing my family's narrative. They saw me as poor, not just in money, but in spirit. They saw me as a failure, incapable of achieving anything on my own. But my grandmother, my wise, wonderful grandmother, she had left me the tools to build a different reality. The money wasn't just money, it was a weapon. It was a sacred trust. For days, I just stared at the check, at the numbers in the bank account, where I deposited it. The family's insults echoed, but now, her words echoed louder. Make them listen. But how? Then a name surfaced from the back of my mind. Leo Martinez. My old classmate from our business strategy course in college. Leo was a quiet, wickedly smart tech guy who always wore band t-shirts and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. While everyone else was fawning over the loud, charismatic students who gave flashy presentations, Leo had paid attention to the substance. He'd once told me, after I'd salvaged a group project he and I were on, "You have the best strategic mind in this class, Gracie. You see all the angles." No one had ever said anything like that to me before. I spent an hour searching online, my heart pounding with a new, unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't dread. It was purpose. I finally found him on a professional networking site, listed as a freelance developer. I stared at his phone number for a long time, my hand hovering over my phone. The old Gracie would have talked herself out of it. The old Gracie would have listened to the voice that sounded suspiciously like her mother's. But the old Gracie had been burned to the ground at that gala. A new one was rising from the ashes. I took a deep, shuddering breath and made the call. "Leo Martinez," a voice answered, sounding slightly surprised. "Leo? It's Gracie. Gracie Vance. We were in Professor Albright's class together." There was a pause. "Vance. Wow. Yeah, I remember. The slideshow crasher," he said, and I could hear a smile in his voice. "How are you?" "I'm working on something new," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "I have an idea, and I think I need your help." I met Leo at a coffee shop that smelled of burnt espresso and desperation. It was the kind of place with wobbly tables and mismatched chairs, a world away from the five-star restaurants my family frequented. Leo looked much the same as he had in college: jeans, a faded Ramones t-shirt, and an air of restless intelligence. He was hunched over a laptop covered in stickers, a half-empty mug beside him. He told me he'd been freelancing, building websites and apps for small businesses, but he was getting tired of being a hired gun for people with bad ideas. He felt underappreciated, a feeling I knew all too well. "So," he said, leaning back and giving me a curious look, "you have an idea?" My hands were shaking, so I clasped them together on the table. My voice started off quiet, hesitant. "My family, they run a foundation, the Vance Family Foundation." Leo nodded. "I've heard of it. Big galas, right? The hospital wing." "Exactly," I said, my voice gaining a bit of strength. "It's all about galas and photo ops and big, shiny buildings. It's about my father's ego. But my grandmother, the one who started it, she wanted to help people directly. I want to honor that." I slid a folder across the table. It was filled with notes and printouts I'd obsessively compiled over the last few days. "I want to start a new foundation, a different kind, one named after her." Eleanor's voice. Leo opened the folder, his dark eyes scanning the pages. I held my breath. "Our mission," I continued, the words coming faster now, "would be to fund educational programs and provide microgrants directly to individuals, not to institutions. We'd help someone pay for a coding boot camp, or a public speaking course, or the seed money for a small business that benefits their community. It would be completely transparent. Every donation, every grant, tracked on a public ledger on the website. No secrets, no galas." I was pitching my heart out, describing a direct counter-assault to everything my family's foundation stood for. Theirs was about legacy and status. Mine would be about empowerment and action. Leo was silent for a long time, just flipping through my messy, passionate notes. I could feel my confidence beginning to waver. Maybe it was a stupid idea. Maybe my mother was right. Finally, he looked up from the folder, and there was a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "This isn't just an idea, Gracie," he said slowly. "This is a weapon. You're building a better model. A smarter model." He tapped a page where I'd sketched out a user interface for the donation platform. "I can build this. I can make it bulletproof." He grinned, a real, genuine grin that transformed his face. "When do we start?" A wave of relief, so powerful it almost made me cry, washed over me. For the first time, someone didn't just hear my idea, they understood the why behind it. "Now," I said. "We start now." And so began our secret war. We operated out of our respective cramped apartments, connected by encrypted chat and late-night video calls. My tiny studio apartment became a command center. The walls were covered in whiteboards filled with flowcharts and budget projections. Stacks of books on nonprofit law and digital marketing teetered on every surface. Leo, my brilliant ally, worked from his own digital cave, turning my abstract concepts into clean, elegant code. He was the architect. I was the strategist. The tangible struggle was real. And it was brutal. Grandma Eleanor's $50,000 felt like a fortune at first. But it began to evaporate with terrifying speed. There were legal fees to incorporate as a non-profit, software licenses, server hosting costs. Every expense was a stab of anxiety. I watched my bank account dwindle, each dollar spent a step further away from the safety net I'd briefly held. I lived on instant ramen and cheap coffee, the kind that tasted like dirt, but provided the fuel I needed. I poured every ounce of my energy, every waking moment into this project. Sleep became a luxury. I ignored the increasingly angry voicemails from my parents, who couldn't understand why I was suddenly so distant. Their world of charity dinners and family reunions felt like it was on another planet. There were so many moments of near failure. One week, the test server Leo had built crashed, taking with it a week's worth of development. I remember the frantic, three-way call with a customer service agent in another country at 3 a.m., my voice tight with panic, trying to explain a technical problem I barely understood. Another time, our initial application for nonprofit status was rejected because I had filled out a form incorrectly. It felt like a personal failing, a confirmation of every useless label my family had ever thrown at me. I sat on my floor for an hour, just staring at the rejection letter, feeling the weight of my own inadequacy. It was during those low moments that the stutter, my old enemy, would creep back in. Alone in my apartment, I practiced my pitches to the cold, unblinking eye of my laptop camera. I'd outline the mission of Eleanor's Voice, the innovative donation model. The lives we could change, but under the weight of exhaustion and self-doubt, the words would sometimes get stuck. Cool? We want to give. I'd stammer to an empty room, my face burning with shame even though no one was there to see it. It was a constant, internal battle against the ingrained belief that my mother was right, that I was destined to fail. But then I would look at my grandmother's note, taped to the edge of my monitor, make them listen, and I would start again. After 3 months of relentless secret work, the website for Eleanor's Voice was ready. It was beautiful. Leo had outdone himself. It was sleek, modern, and user-friendly, with our core promise of transparency built into every page. There was a section where donors could see exactly where their money was going, in real time. It was the antithesis of the stuffy, outdated Vance Family Foundation website. With my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, we hit the launch button. And then, nothing. For a full week the website sat there, a pristine digital ghost town. The analytics page showed 0 visitors, 0 donations. The silence was a roar in my ears, louder than any of my mother's odds. All that work, all that sacrifice, all of my grandmother's inheritance, was it all for nothing? A crushing wave of despair washed over me. I started to believe it. Maybe my family was right all along. I was a failure, and this whole project was just a pathetic, expensive delusion. I was just about to call Leo and tell him we should pull the plug, when my phone buzzed with a notification from our payment processor. You have received a new donation. I stared at the screen, my eyes blurring with tears. It was an anonymous donation. It wasn't from me. It wasn't from Leo. It was real. $100. It might as well have been 1,000,000. I called Leo immediately, my voice choked with emotion. He started yelling with joy on the other end of the line. We celebrated like we'd just won the lottery. It was more than money. It was proof. It was a signal that our idea, our voice had reached someone. The concept worked. A few weeks later, I was in the local grocery store, grabbing another week's supply of ramen, when I heard a familiar voice. Gracie? I turned to see Mark, my cousin Brianna's husband. He stood there by the cereal aisle, looking deeply uncomfortable. Mark was the ultimate enabler. He wasn't a cruel person on his own, but he was spineless, completely swept up in Brianna's ambition. He always laughed a little too loudly when my mother made a joke at my expense, and he always looked away when Brianna was being particularly vicious. "Oh hey Mark," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hey," he shifted his weight, avoiding my eyes. "Listen, I haven't seen you around." "I've been busy," I said, a massive understatement. "Yeah, well, Brianna is going nuts, planning for next year's family reunion gala. It's the big Christmas one. She's got some huge announcement lined up. Something about a new wing for the city hospital," he said, it with a strange mix of secondhand pride and genuine unease. He looked down at his shopping cart, then back at me. "Your mom said you weren't returning calls. She says you're being difficult." He didn't defend me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just reported the official family line, like a messenger boy. A flash of guilt crossed his face before he quickly masked it. He knew it was wrong, but he would never say anything. He would always choose the path of least resistance, the path that led back to Brianna's good graces. "I'm fine, Mark. Just busy," I repeated, my voice colder this time. "Right. Well, see you around," he said, and practically fled down the aisle. The encounter, as small as it was a painful jab. It was a glimpse back into the world I was fighting against. A world of whispers and judgments and enabling silence. It reminded me that while I was celebrating a tiny victory in the shadows, they were out in the open, planning their next big triumph. The interaction didn't break me. It hardened my resolve into steel. The $100 donation was a start. But it wasn't enough. We were stuck. To attract the kind of partners we needed, to actually start funding our first major project, we needed a significant cash infusion. We needed to look like a serious player, but the donations were just trickling in. $10 here, 25 there. It was wonderful, but it was slow. The foundation was bleeding money on operational costs, and my own bank account was dangerously low. I was back to feeling that familiar financial desperation, the cold dread that I had bet everything on a losing horse. One night, after another day of seeing no significant change, the despair was overwhelming. I was on a video call with Leo, my face pale and tired in the blue light of the monitor. "I don't know, Leo," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "Maybe this was just a stupid, arrogant idea. Who am I to think I can build something like this?" My mother's voice was in my head, a relentless critic. "You're not a leader. You're a nobody." "Stop. Don't even go there," Leo said immediately, his voice sharp and firm. He leaned into his camera, his eyes intense. "Gracie, do you remember our senior presentation for Albright's class?" I frowned. "Yeah. It was a disaster." "No," he corrected me. "It was a triumph. Your entire slideshow file got corrupted 2 minutes before we were supposed to go on. Your notes, the charts, the graphics, everything was gone. The rest of the team was panicking. You had nothing." He paused, letting the memory sink in. "And you still got up there. You walked to the front of that room and you pitched our entire project from memory for 15 straight minutes. You didn't just save it, you nailed it. We got the highest grade in the class." I had almost forgotten that day. The terror, the adrenaline, the strange clarity that came when everything fell apart. "You didn't stutter once, Gracie," Leo said quietly. "Not a single time. Because you don't fail when the pressure is on. You get better. You're the smartest person I know. I wouldn't be here, working for ramen money, if I didn't believe that with every fiber of my being." His words were a lifeline. His unwavering faith was the support I so desperately needed, a shield against the years of doubt my family had instilled in me. He saw the person I was, not the person they told me I was. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, his words replaying in my mind. You get better. He was right. I couldn't give up now. I had to go all in. I had to create my own pressure. That night, I made the boldest, most terrifying move of my life. I went to the bank and took out a small, high-interest personal loan, leveraging the tiny stock portfolio my grandmother had left me. It was a massive gamble. Then, I took that loan money, combined it with the last of my inheritance, and I made a large, six-figure donation to Eleanor's Voice. I did it anonymously, routing it through a private trust I'd set up for this very contingency. It felt insane, like setting my own safety net on fire, but it was the only way. We needed legitimacy. We needed a spark to start the fire. I was betting on myself, for the very first time. The big anonymous donation worked exactly as I'd hoped. It was the snowball that started the avalanche. The six-figure sum landing in our account triggered a few alerts in the niche world of online philanthropy. Small tech blogs, the kind that focus on disruptive startups, began to write articles about us. They called Eleanor's Voice a refreshingly transparent new model for charity, and speculated about the enigmatic private philanthropist behind the initial seed funding. The mystery created a buzz. Suddenly, people were paying attention. The small, trickling donations started to get bigger. We went from $20 donations to $500 donations. A small family-run company in California, impressed by our model, made a donation of $10,000. The snowball was rolling, getting bigger and faster every day. The power was shifting. Our first major victory came when we secured a partnership with a local community center in a low-income neighborhood. They had a dream of creating a free public speaking workshop for underprivileged youth, a program designed to give teenagers the confidence and skills to advocate for themselves. They had the passion but lacked the funds. They were exactly the kind of partner I'd dreamed of. We funded their entire program for the first year. A few weeks later, they invited me to observe the final workshop showcase. I sat in the back of a brightly lit, slightly shabby community hall, my heart full. I watched a shy 15-year-old girl who, I was told, had barely spoken a word at the beginning of the program, stand up in front of 50 people and deliver a powerful, passionate speech about the need for better resources in her neighborhood. She spoke with clarity and confidence. She had found her voice. In that moment, watching her, the feeling was absolutely intoxicating. This was real. This wasn't about a name on a building, or a fawning article in a society magazine. This was a life gained. I was no longer just Gracie the failure, Gracie the useless stutterer. In the shadows, I was the secret founder of a growing movement. I was building something that mattered. The workload became too much for just Leo and me. The foundation was becoming a real entity. With our growing funds, I made a crucial decision. I hired a part-time assistant, a sharp, discreet woman named Clara, to handle all external communications. She became the public-facing contact for Eleanor's Voice. This built a crucial wall, a layer of separation between my real identity and the foundation. To the world, the founder of Eleanor's Voice was an enigmatic, private figure who communicated only through an assistant. It fed the mystique, and more importantly, it kept my family completely and utterly oblivious. They were still living in their world, planning their galas, never knowing that their biggest nobody was quietly becoming somebody. It was just a few weeks before the annual Vance Family Foundation Christmas Gala. This year was supposed to be their biggest yet. The feeling of impending collision was growing stronger every day. I was at a business luncheon downtown, the kind of event I now attended with a carefully constructed professional persona. I was there to finalize a major corporate sponsorship for Eleanor's Voice. I was closing a deal that would fund our national expansion. As I was shaking hands with a corporate VP, my eyes drifted across the bustling high-end restaurant, and then I saw them. Seated at a prime table by the window were my father, my cousin Brianna, and the man from the gala last year, Julian Croft, the neutral observer, the venture capitalist they had been so desperate to impress. They looked like a portrait of power. My father, confident and charming. Brianna, animated and polished, leaning in as she spoke. Julian, listening with a polite, coolly analytical expression. They were laughing about something, raising their glasses in a toast. For a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, the old fear washed over me like an icy wave. My breath hitched. My palms grew damp. All I wanted to do was run. I wanted to turn around, walk out of that restaurant, and disappear back into the safety of my anonymity. The new confidence I had built felt like a fragile glass sculpture, and seeing them threaten to shatter it, I could just let my foundation grow quietly. I didn't need to confront them. Why did I still crave their validation? I could just walk away and be successful in secret, on my own terms. The urge to retreat, to avoid the inevitable conflict, was overwhelming. This was my final test of will. I forced myself to stay put, to breathe. I watched them, but this time, I wasn't watching them as the scared, rejected daughter and cousin. I was watching them as a strategist. I saw Brianna fawning over Julian, her laughter a little too loud, her gestures a little too dramatic. Her charm was artificial, a carefully crafted performance. And then I looked at Julian Croft. I saw his polite smile, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. He wasn't charmed. He was evaluating. He was assessing an investment. In that moment, my perspective shifted. I didn't see power at their table. I saw a desperate performance. I saw a brand built on image, not substance. And I knew, with a sudden bone-deep certainty, that my truth was more powerful than their act. My foundation, built on transparency and real-world impact, was the superior product. The fear receded, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't going to retreat. I was going to see this through to the end. The invitation arrived a week later. It was thick and heavy, the cardstock embossed with gold foil. The Vance Family Foundation cordially invites you to the annual Christmas Gala and Legacy Celebration. It felt less like an invitation, and more like a summons. I knew this was the one. This was the event Brianna's husband, Mark, had been talking about. This was their big moment. The local news had already run a small piece about the gala, mentioning a major joint venture with the city council, and a transformative announcement. A news van was probably already parked outside my parents' mansion. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Gracie, I expect you to be there," she said, her voice clipped and cold. There was no warmth, no pleasantry. It was a command. And for God's sake, wear something decent. Julian Croft is announcing his major partnership with us tonight. This is the culmination of a year's worth of work. Don't do anything to embarrass the family name. The threat was clear: show up, be quiet, and don't ruin our big night. The old me would have been terrified, my stomach churning with anxiety. The old me would have been planning my escape route. But as I looked at the golden invitation in my hand, a strange, cold calm settled over me. The fear was gone. The board was set. The pieces were in place. "I'll be there," I said, my voice perfectly steady. There was a surprised pause on her end. "Good," she said, and hung up. I immediately dialed Leo. He picked up on the first ring. "It's tonight," I said, my voice low and even. "Are you ready?" he asked, a hint of excitement in his voice. "I'm ready," I said. "It's time. Book a table for us, and not in the back. I want it front and center." I arrived at the gala alone. The venue was a historic downtown hotel, its grand ballroom dripping with crystals and overflowing with the city's elite. I had chosen my armor carefully, a simple, sleeveless dress in a deep, midnight blue. It was elegant but understated. It spoke of confidence, not of a desire for attention. As I walked in, I felt a change in the air. I held my head high, my posture straight. I wasn't hiding behind a fern this time. My family noticed the difference immediately. I saw them standing near the entrance, holding court. My mother's eyes widened slightly as she saw me, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before the usual mask of disapproval settled back in. I walked directly toward them. Brianna, flanked by her husband Mark, intercepted me. She looked me up and down, a condescending smirk playing on her lips. Gracie, I'm surprised you came, she said, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. Finally decided to crawl out of your little apartment? Trying to network? Mark shifted uncomfortably beside her, his gaze darting away. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Something like that, I replied, my voice even, a small, serene smile on my face. My mother glided over. Gracie, darling, try not to bother the important guests, she said, patting my arm in a gesture that was meant to look affectionate, but felt like a warning. There are a lot of influential people here tonight. They were doing it again, putting on the same old show, publicly, gently, humiliating me, trying to remind me of my place, to put me back in my box. But this time, it didn't work. The words didn't sting. My calm smile seemed to unnerve them more than any argument would have. I won't, I said, and walked past them. I scanned the room and saw my table. It was exactly where I'd asked it to be, near the stage, with a perfect view. Leo was already there, looking sharp in a well-fitted suit. He stood up as I approached, a proud, supportive smile on his face. Next to him was a woman I was thrilled to see. Mrs. Davis, the director of the community youth center we had partnered with. Her presence here tonight was a quiet testament to the real work our foundation was doing. I had invited her as my personal guest. She greeted me with a warm, genuine hug that felt more like family than anything I had ever received from my own mother. I took my seat. From the stage, my father began his opening remarks, his voice booming through the ballroom. He spoke of the Vance family's long history of giving, of their unprecedented success, and their unwavering commitment to the community. It was the same speech he gave every year. Then, he beamed. And now, it is my distinct honor to introduce the brilliant mind behind our new expansion, a woman whose vision and tenacity have made tonight possible. Please welcome my niece, Brianna Sterling. The room erupted in applause. Brianna walked to the podium, soaking it in. My family at the head table was glowing, basking in the reflected glory. My mother shot me a quick, pitying glance across the room, a look that said, "This is what real success looks like. This is what you'll never be." They were enjoying their last laugh, savoring their moment of triumph just before their big announcement. They had no idea that their biggest failure was about to become their biggest problem. Brianna stood at the podium, a dazzling smile on her face, the very picture of success and confidence. She let the applause wash over her for a moment, before raising a hand for silence. The ballroom quieted instantly, the air thick with anticipation. "Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Uncle Richard," she began, her voice smooth and practiced. "For months, we at the Vance Family Foundation have been working tirelessly on a new initiative, one we believe will reshape healthcare access in our city." She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes sweeping across the room, making contact with all the important faces. I saw her gaze linger for a second on Julian Croft, who was seated at the head table, watching her with that same keen, analytical expression I remembered from the restaurant. "We knew we couldn't do it alone," Brianna continued, her voice filled with manufactured humility. "To achieve something truly transformative, we needed a partner with the same bold vision. We needed a partner with momentum, with innovation, and with significant resources. And so, we began a search for a dynamic new philanthropic force in this city." A murmur of excitement went through the crowd. This was the big news everyone had been waiting for. My family looked ecstatic. My mother was practically vibrating with pride. They thought they were about to announce a coup, a partnership that would cement their legacy for another generation. "Tonight," Brianna declared, her voice rising with excitement, "I am thrilled to announce that we found that partner. Tonight, we are officially merging our new hospital wing initiative with this incredible organization." On cue, the giant screen behind her, which had been displaying a tasteful looping video of the Vance family logo, flickered to life. Two logos appeared, side by side, connected by a plus sign. On the left was the familiar, ornate crest of the Vance Family Foundation, and on the right, in a clean, modern font, was the logo for Eleanor's Voice. A collective gasp went through the room. I could hear whispers erupting all around me. Eleanor's Voice? I've read about them. They're the ones with that huge anonymous donor, right? I heard they're impossible to get a meeting with. I looked at my family's table. They were stunned, but in a good way. Their shock quickly melted into pure, unadulterated ecstasy. My father's jaw was literally hanging open in disbelief. My mother's eyes were wide, a look of greedy triumph on her face. They had done it. They had landed the city's hottest, most talked about new foundation. They had no idea how, but they weren't about to question their good fortune. My mother caught my eye and gave me a smug, pitying look, as if to say, "See, Gracie, this is how the real world works. Powerful people connect with other powerful people." She thought this was the ultimate lesson in my own irrelevance. On stage, Brianna was beaming, riding the wave of shock and awe. And now, she concluded, her voice ringing with triumph, we are honored to welcome the mysterious and brilliant founder of Eleanor's Voice, who is here with us tonight to say a few words and to officially formalize this incredible donation. The room erupted. All heads in the ballroom swiveled. A wave of motion as hundreds of people began scanning the crowd, searching for this mysterious, powerful figure. My family was on the edge of their seats, their faces beaming, ready to stand and applaud the person who had just validated their entire existence. The spotlight operator high up in a booth at the back of the room switched on a powerful beam of light. It began to sweep across the tables, a slow, dramatic search for the guest of honor. The light passed over the mayor, over a state senator, over the heads of corporate CEOs. It slid across the room, getting closer and closer to my table. My heart was a steady, heavy drum in my chest. This was it. The moment of impact. The spotlight swept over my table, illuminating Leo and Mrs. Davis for a second, before continuing its journey. But then, it stopped. It hesitated, and then it swept back, slowly, deliberately, until the brilliant white circle landed directly on me, pinning me in its glare. A profound, confused silence fell over the entire ballroom. The excited chatter died instantly. It was as if someone had hit a mute button on the universe. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were now fixed on me. The quiet girl in the simple blue dress, the expressions on their faces were a mixture of confusion and disbelief. From the head table, I could hear my mother's stage whisper, sharp and angry. "It's a mistake," she hissed to my father. "The lighting guy is an idiot. Get his attention." Then, her voice dropped, laced with the familiar venom. "She'll get up there and stutter. She'll ruin everything." On stage, Brianna's triumphant smile had frozen, then completely faltered. Her face, projected in high definition on the giant screens flanking the stage, was a mask of utter confusion, which was rapidly morphing into dawning horror. Her eyes darted from me to the lighting booth, and back again, her mind clearly unable to process what was happening. Before my mother could cause more of a scene, before Brianna could say a word, a man in a black suit, the gala's event manager, walked briskly and purposefully to my table. The entire room watched his every step. He leaned down, ignoring Leo and Mrs. Davis, and spoke directly to me. His voice was not loud, but in the dead silence of the room, it carried with perfect clarity. "Miss Vance," he said, his tone one of deep professional respect. "Ma'am, we're ready for you. The microphone is ready." The effect was nuclear. At the head table, the entire Vance family froze. It was a perfect cinematic tableau of shock. My father's jaw, which had been hanging open in delight, now dropped even further in utter disbelief. He looked like a fish gasping for air. My mother turned pale. All the blood drained from her face. leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white against her vibrant red lipstick. She looked like she had seen a ghost. And Brianna, on stage, was completely speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was shattered. In that singular, stretched-out moment, the entire social dynamic of the room was rewritten. Julian Croft slowly turned his head away from the imploding Brianna. He looked at me, his eyes wide. The polite, dismissive mask was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated shock that was quickly shifting into something else, dawning, profound respect. He was connecting the dots, and he was impressed. At my side, Leo didn't say a word. He just smiled, a quiet, victorious smile, and gave me a subtle, encouraging nod. Mrs. Davis, the director from the youth center, patted my hand under the table, her eyes shining with pride. The ripple effect was instantaneous. The whispers started again, but this time they weren't confused. They were astonished. That's her? Gracie Vance? The quiet one is the founder? The power in the room had shifted, completely and irrevocably, from their table to mine. I stood up. The simple blue dress seemed to shimmer under the intense light, no longer looking plain, but powerful. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a heavy, waiting thing. I started to walk towards the stage, my steps calm and measured. Every eye in the room followed me. I had to walk directly past my family's head table. I didn't look at them for long, but I saw enough. Their faces were masks of disbelief, horror, and a dawning, terrible understanding. Their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them, and I was the one holding the sledgehammer. I reached the stage and walked up the small set of stairs. Brianna was still standing there, frozen by the podium, looking like a statue of forgotten glory. She stumbled back as I approached, her face a mess of confusion and humiliation. I took the microphone from its stand. It felt cool and solid in my hand. I turned to the packed ballroom, to the hundreds of faces staring up at me. But first, I let my gaze find my mother. She was staring at me, her expression a toxic cocktail of fury and shock. I leaned into the microphone, my breath steady, my voice perfectly clear, and I delivered the final word on the matter that had defined my entire life in her eyes. I think I can handle it, Mom. The words, spoken so calmly, landed like a physical blow. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. I didn't wait for a reaction. I turned my attention to the audience. "Good evening," I said, my voice resonating through the silent hall, strong and confident. There was no trace of a stutter. My grandmother, Eleanor Vance, believed in the power of a single voice. She taught me that wealth and status mean nothing if you don't use them to lift others up, to help them find their own voice when the world tries to silence them. I gave a powerful, eloquent speech. I didn't use notes. I didn't need them. The words had been living inside me for a year. I spoke about our mission, about transparency, about the real, tangible impact we were having on people's lives. I told the story of the shy teenager at the community center. Then, I looked back at Brianna and at my family. It was time for the final reveal. Eleanor's voice is honored to be part of the future of this city's healthcare, I announced. Which is why we are not just partnering with the Vance Family Foundation. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. As of last week, we have acquired its outstanding debts and will be absorbing its programs under a new charter of transparency and accountability. The Vance Foundation is now a subsidiary of Eleanor's Voice. I had effectively and publicly bought the company. I had just exposed their deep financial instability to their biggest donors and the entire city without saying a single negative word. Gasps erupted across the ballroom. The reveal was complete. My victory was absolute. The room was in chaos. For a beat there was just the sound of shocked murmuring. And then, one person stood up. Julian Croft. His eyes were locked on me, and his expression was one of pure, unadulterated admiration. He began to applaud, A slow, deliberate clap that cut through the noise. Then Leo and Mrs. Davis stood up. Then another table, and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom, save for one table, was on its feet, giving me a thunderous standing ovation. My family was left sitting alone, isolated in a sea of my victory. They were an island of shame in an ocean of applause. My mother looked like a ghost, her face a mask of horror. My mother's face was ashen. He had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. And Brianna, her perfect facade had completely shattered, revealing the raw, ugly humiliation beneath. She looked small and defeated. After I left the stage, they cornered me near the exit, their faces twisted with rage and disbelief. "Gracie, how could you do this?" my mother stammered, her voice shaking. "We're your parents. This is your family. This is some kind of sick joke, right?" Brianna hissed, trying desperately to save face. "You manipulated us." I looked at them, at their frantic, desperate faces, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was only a calm, quiet finality. "This isn't personal," I said, my voice cool and level. "This is business. The Vance Foundation was failing. I saved it. My assistant will be in touch to schedule a meeting with your board." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet dismissal was more devastating than any shouting match could have been. I turned my back on their sputtering, speechless forms, and walked over to Julian Croft, who was waiting for me. He shook my hand, his grip firm. That was one of the most impressive things I have ever seen. "Miss Vance?" he said, the Miss Vance now filled with genuine respect. "I believe you and I should talk. I'm very interested in the work Eleanor's voice is doing." Over his shoulder, I saw the final piece of fallout. Mark, the enabler, was staring at his wife, Brianna. But he wasn't looking at her with sympathy. He was looking at her with a look of dawning horror, as if seeing for the first time the cruel, arrogant person he had tied his life to. The foundation of their world had cracked, and the rifts were just beginning to show. A month later, I was standing in a large corner office, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. The afternoon sun streamed in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. This had been my father's office, the seat of power for the Vance Family Foundation. Now, it was mine. The minimalist desk was clear, save for a laptop and a single framed photo of Grandma Eleanor. The heavy, ornate furniture was gone, replaced by clean, modern lines. On the glass door, new lettering had been applied just this morning. It read, "Grace Vance, CEO, the Eleanor's Voice Foundation." My family had tried to fight it. Of course, there were angry phone calls, threats of lawyers, but the numbers didn't lie. Their foundation had been a house of cards, propped up by image and drowning in debt. I hadn't come to destroy them. I hadn't frozen their credit cards or seized their personal assets. I didn't need to. I had done something far more effective. I had taken away their stage. I had absorbed their legacy and made it better. Without the foundation to give them status, they were just a wealthy family with a tarnished name. They had become irrelevant. The door opened, and Leo walked in, holding a tablet. He no longer looked like a sleep-deprived freelancer. He wore a sharp blazer, the official COO of our rapidly growing organization. "The first round of Eleanor's Voice scholarships just went out," he said, a wide grin on his face. "You should read the thank you letters. They're already coming in." He handed me the tablet, and I scrolled through the messages from students across the country, their words filled with hope and gratitude. I looked away from the screen, out the window at the sprawling city below. A deep sense of peace settled over me. This whole journey hadn't just been a war against my family. It had been a war against the little voice in my own head. The one that whispered, I was a useless nobody. The one that echoed my mother's cruelest words. I had won. I had found my voice. And now, I was going to spend the rest of my life using it to help others find theirs. My story is proof that the labels other people give you only have power if you let them. My family called me a failure. A stutterer, a nobody. They tried to silence me, but in the end I was the one who held the microphone. We've all been underestimated at some point. What labels have you had to fight to overcome? What was the moment you finally proved them wrong? Let me know your story in the comments below. I'll be reading and replying to as many as I can. And if this story resonated with you, and you believe in the power of finding your own voice, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming the odds. Your support means the world. Thanks for watching.